Yo. Welcome back to BBN After Dark. We have a lot to talk about on today's show. We're going to go through all of our fall awards a little bit more in depth. Obviously, that Friday show, we had a lot to talk about, so we weren't really able to go too in depth with these awards. So, going to go a little bit more in depth today. And then we're going to talk about the BWL drafts. A lot going on in those drafts. Obviously, the league starts this Saturday. Very, very exciting stuff. And I want to get, Bernie's kind of the neutral party here, so I want to get kind of his thoughts to how he thought the draft went. And then, of course, me and KJ will also talk about some of the picks we made. But let's go ahead and start with our fall awards, starting with the youth MVP race. Obviously, Diego Buccio won it. A great season from him, really anchored by that monster September. But I want to go through and look at the top five. Harrison Blabaum, number 2, Lucas Wilbur, number 3, Lucas Closter, number 4, and Nifrey Kabarkis, number 5. I thought all of these guys really had a case to win it, and I think all of these guys at different times were the best player in the Bears, over the course of the season. So I want to go ahead and start with Lucas Closter, who comes in a 4th place, and I would say of the 5 names here, maybe to the non 11U people, maybe a little bit of surprise to see him here. But Bernie, I want to get your thoughts. Lucas Closter, the best player on that 11U Floyd team. What did you think of his fall season and his kind of 4th place in the MVP?
Yeah, obviously, I think with him coming in 4th place, he was the best hitter on that 11U squad. And he showed flashes of it in the summer. I know a couple weeks ago on BBN After Dark, we made the comparison that one day he could be Mac Floyd, his own coach. So his ceiling's there. I think he's just a little more consistent this fall, and obviously, 4th place MVP, he had a massive fall season.
Yeah, a beast. And I think when you're looking at the MVP, I think the first step to winning Bears MVP is being the best player on your own team. And I think Lucas was able to be that guy this fall. Now, there's a lot of good up and coming players in this Levy Floyd team, so I think that bar is going to continue to get raised. But I thought Lucas Closer had a great season. Obviously, been in the Bears for a while. I think he's the longest tenured Bear on that team. Maybe him and Whedon Hainline are kind of neck and neck there. But great season from him, and I think he's going to continue to kind of be in this MVP conversation going forward. The next thing I want to talk about is Nifrey Kabarkis. Obviously, this guy, rookie of the year, his first fall with the Bears, a monster season, and it felt like he wasn't quite that same dominant force in the summer. He was still good, he was still a solid player, but I think he kind of got away from that MVP caliber player we saw in his first season. But KJ, I thought this fall he really got back to that form. What did you think about Nifrey's, season as a whole, and what did you think changed from the summer to the fall?
Yeah, I think Nifrey was someone who, something we don't talk about much, but is a true factor at that age. He's someone who struggled with the bat weight change. Going from drop 10s to I had him swinging drop 5, in the spring. He's a guy who kind of struggled with that. In the first part of the season, especially in the spring, he was really late on everything. I mean, it didn't matter if the pitcher was throwing slow or hard. He was late, and I think going into the fall, he really started to buy into the approach of always being early. And it turned into the fall, no matter how hard the pitcher threw, he was pulling him hard. He was hitting the ball hard off him. So I think that was the biggest thing for Nifrey, the biggest turning point. And I think going into next spring, he's going to continue and be even better than he was this fall.
Yeah, I think Nifrey, if anybody did start to doubt if he was a MVP caliber player, I think they definitely saw this fall that he is that guy. And again, I think best player on your own team is a key factor in winning the MVP. And I think Nifrey is not that far from Diego. And I think we saw at times this fall, Nifrey was the best hitter on the team. So I think definitely he's gonna have a case going forward. Bernie, these next two guys, Harrison Blabaum and Lucas Wilburn, both were top 3 in the MVP voting in the summer and the fall. If there was a full season MVP award, it definitely would have gone to one of these two guys because nobody was as consistent throughout the entire season as these two guys were. They caught, Diego super hot in the fall and obviously Jack Dalton, who was super hot in the summer. But these two all season long were super consistent. I would say the two most consistent players in the Bears this year were Lucas Wilbur and Harrison Blabaum, at least consistently operating at that superstar level. Bernie, obviously, we talk about Harrison all the time, definitely an MVP caliber player. But give me your thoughts on both these guys in terms of the seasons they had were how were they able to stay so consistent at a superstar level all season long?
Yeah, one thing I think that is in common with both these guys, um, is they're up there to hit. With Harrison, it doesn't matter. What his first at bat he did. He's going up their first pitch looking to hit a bomb, right? He's going up there being aggressive, keeping his head down, swinging hard every pitch, right? Nothing affects him, right? First at bat can be bad. Second at bat's gonna be a lot better. When he's hot, he's hot. And it seems like he was hot, all season. Same with Lucas Wilburn, from what I've seen from him. Another guy, same approach with him. Doesn't matter the day he's having. He's still gonna put up big numbers every weekend. And yeah, both these guys had amazing seasons. Like we said, if we had a full season MVP, it would definitely be one of these two guys.
Yeah, absolutely. These two just absolute superstars in the Bears. And I have a little something planned for some of our offseason shows. But there's going to be a segment where we kind of talk about the superstar tier of players. I think both these guys are right in the middle of that superstar tier. But let's go ahead and talk about the high school MVP award. Obviously, these guys, their fall season, a little bit longer than the youth players, and I think we got to see a lot of explosive play. Obviously, we talked a lot about Mac Floyd all season long. I think we talked about Brennan Nickerson all season long. But another guy who, in my opinion, this fall specifically, kind of flew under the radar with how good he was Landon Nickerson. Obviously, he's a guy who is a superstar in the Bears. We've talked about him a lot. But I felt like this fall, there was a lot of talk about Wes Brody. There was a lot of talk about the Andrew Willeret kind of renaissance season he had. There's a lot of talk about different guys that I felt like Landon was a little bit less talked about this fall. KJ, give me your thoughts on Landon Nickerson and the fall season he had coming third in the MVP voting.
Yeah, when someone is so good and they set the standards so high like Landon has his entire career, when he has a great season but not an elite season, it's taken as not a great and not, a good year. Which is almost unfair because I think there's, 98% of Bears players would kill to have the kind of season Landon had this year. And the scary thing is, this isn't even his best. We've seen his best and what this guy can do. And, he's obviously an MVP candidate even when he's not at his best. So I think, again, you get this guy another winner, going into spring. And I think even going into the next year when he's got to go to drop 3, this guy has been swinging to drop 3, practicing with it since he was 12 years old. I mean, he's going to be ready for it. And, this guy's so ahead of, I don't think he's going to see many setbacks as he gets older since he's handled so many, challenges already. And he's already well adjusted into the next level.
Yeah, and obviously playing football this fall, you wonder what kind of toll that took on his body that he was still able to put these kind of numbers. I think this next spring, I'm going to be really interested to see what kind of year he has because I think he definitely is going to have an argument as the best player in the Bears over in next spring. Let's go ahead and talk about the guy who came fifth in the MVP voting. Definitely before the fall, you'd say this was a big surprise. But Wes Brody, a monster fall season. This guy really felt like he stepped into his own as both in the leadership role and also with his play. I thought from weekend in and weekend out, I thought this was the most consistent player on this team. And I thought he had a great season. Bernie, give me your thoughts on Wes Brody and do you think this is the best we're going to see from West? Is fifth in the MVP voting kind of his ceiling? Or do you think he's got another level to his game?
Yeah, obviously it's been great to see this from West. Like you said, going from a player that was basically a role player all season long to being, one of the team superstars. And fifth MVP voting is legit, man. Could I think he go higher? Sure, right. But there's a lot of very good players in the Bears, right? Even just on his own team, yeah, Landon Nickerson, Ben Combs, even like Ivan Saxon, right? A lot of good hitters there. So I think he can go higher, but it's gonna be tough just because of the how many good hitters we have at the high school level.
Yeah, and I do think the one area where maybe you could see his ceiling increase is in his body. Obviously West got a great body right now, but if he could even put on 15, 20 pounds of muscle, you could see this guy go from being I think he had 2 or 3 home runs this year. He could hit 6 or 7, and all of a sudden he's an MVP caliber player. But I definitely think, great progression we've seen from him. His if you charted his kind of stats, he's on a clear upward trend. So we're gonna see. I think there's a good chance he does continue to rise and doesn't quite level off. Moving into our youth Cy Young, Lucas Velchek, Cam Bernstein topping here. I think we've talked a lot about both those two guys, both dominant all season long. And, I think both of them had an opportunity to win this award. Obviously, Veli did. And I think Cam had an argument to win it as well. Quinn Steinbeck, kind of under the radar all season long. Again, I think if we have a full season Cy Young award, I think Quinn has a very good opportunity to win it. I'm not sure where he placed in the summer. I know it was top 5. I'm not sure if it was top 3, but he had a great summer season. I think if there's a full season Cy Young award, Quinn's got an opportunity to win it. So I think he had a great season. But I do kind of want to talk about the 4th and 5th in the Cy Young voting, starting with Owen Lewis. This guy set our 12 or 11, 12U strikeout record this season. Absolutely dominant on the mound in that regard. And I think as this 12U Burnsville team gets better, specifically, defensively, as they kind of grow into a little bit more experienced players, I think you see those traditional numbers like ERA, like, hits allowed, those numbers go down. And all of a sudden, I think Owen's got a real chance to win this award. Bernie, give me your thoughts on Owen Lewis as a potential Cy Young candidate going into next season.
Yeah, well, what stands out to Owen, I think, compared to other kids at our age, just the insane amount of accuracy this kid is. I joke around because when I would go out and catch Owen in between innings, right, I put my glove, I'd hide in fastball, and I wouldn't move my glove. He hit my spot perfectly. Like, okay, now let's go low and out fastball. Didn't move my glove, and then like, okay, let's test out this curveball, low curveball, and it's right where my glove was. Right, I don't move my glove when I catch this guy. As he develops his off speed more, we saw it during the fall. He got better and better as the season went on, and I think that just with how accurate this kid is, this kid's always going to be in the running for Cy Young.
Yeah, I think going into next season, despite kind of other guys stepping up, I do think by default he's the number 1 pitcher on this team going into next year. And I think if he gets a little bit stronger, obviously this is his first full winter of Savage Strength. If he gets a little bit stronger and builds some velo to add to his accuracy, I think you can definitely see this guy kind of taking that step forward. But KJ, 5th place was Caden Inman. I think this is a guy who, in my opinion, one of the most underrated players in the entire Bears. Give me your thoughts on his pitching season this fall, KJ.
Yeah, Caden by far is going to be the most consistent, pitcher on that team, and one of the most consistent pitchers in the Bears. Like Bernie said about the importance of pumping strikes. Caden has, he throws 4 different pitches that he can pump for strikes. I mean, this is a guy who's not going to overpower anyone with his stuff, but he's up there switching arm angles. He's up there mixing up his motions. Switching pitches. He'll throw a ball 30 miles an hour, then come back with a ball 60 miles an hour. I mean, he can just toy with hitters so well, and he's my favorite pitcher to watch. I think ZZ and Cam are much more electric. They're going to give you more strikeouts, but watching Caden Inman work, just watching him play mind games with the hitters, he's a great example, man. Anyone can be good at baseball. Anyone can be good at pitching if they're willing to put in the work and willing to adjust, to what works, and what Caden's doing is working. And, in a season of where we had a lot of different pitchers and we had fine guys to step up, Caden was always a constant in that rotation.
Yeah, just one of those guys, kind of like Quinn, where just consistent, underrated, just goes out there, gives your team a chance to win every single time. And I think that kind of the aspect of pitching that, listen, I love talking about Lucas Velchek. I love talking about Cam. I love talking about Mac Floyd, and guys like that. But I think that it's a little bit underrated, that guy who's going to always throw strikes, mix up speeds, and people like to talk about pitchers, not throwers, and I definitely wouldn't call Cam, Mac, or Velchek just throwers. I don't think they're up there just mindlessly throwing fastballs, but I do think there's that little bit of art that Caden and Quinn kind of have when they take the mound. And then with our high school Cy Young Award, Logan Eckert. This again was the toughest award to call. I think Logan had the all-around best season of anybody. Adam Tobias and Jack Dalton both short, low innings, which is why they didn't win it, but dominant when they did pitch. Adam Tobias, I think one of the more sleeper stories of the fall. It just seemed like every time this guy went out there, he dealt. And, we kind of joke about with Adam that, me and Bernie have called him a pitching machine before. And it's not necessarily supposed to mean like it be a mean thing to say. It's just a guy who's going to throw strikes always. He's going to go up there and pump the zone. That's what I mean when I say he's a pitching machine. But he was a lot more than that this fall. I mean, he was mixing up speeds. He was keeping hitters off balance. He had a lot of strikeouts for what we typically think of Adam Tobias. So a really nice season. Same thing with Jack Dalton. He was dominant in the innings he did pitch. And then you have kind of the other spectrum, Santiago Story, who just junk baller, I feel like kind of has some negative connotations to it when you say that. But I do think this guy was just gross, where he was able to throw 5 different pitches in any counts. I thought he had a really nice high school season as well. So a lot of different guys could have won our high school Cy Young Award. Let's go ahead and move into the Rookie of the Year conversation. Obviously, I thought Jack Kester was the clear-cut winner for this award, but a lot of guys putting together good seasons. Bernie or KJ, I actually want to go ahead and start with you here. Let's start with the 11U rookies, Owen Haynes and Carson Griffith. Both these guys, really nice season. I thought both of them were great two-way players. Maybe Carson a little bit better with the arm and Owen a little bit better with the bat, but I think both showed elite tier potential. KJ, between these two players, what do you think of their fall seasons?
Yeah, both obviously were big time contributors into that team and much needed players onto the 11U squad. And I can speak, very highly of Owen Haynes. Here's a guy who's willing to work, and we've talked about Owen Haynes' work ethic before, and how rare it is to find a guy who's so willing to work at such a young age. And Owen's very self aware, and he's very motivated to work, and he wants to be the best. And at that young of an age, you can't really find that. So I think Owen Haynes is going to have a big time season come spring, and he's going to be the best player on this team. He's going to be, to that 11U Floyd team what ZZ is to the 13U age, and Lucas Wilburn and Harrison Blowbaum. How every team has that big superstar. I think that's how Owen Haynes is going to step in to do. And with Carson Griffith, man, I think here's a guy who's new to the Bears. He didn't really know, he didn't really know about all the extra programs. He wasn't a guy who, one of those rare guys who joins and jumps into everything. But I definitely see Carson Griffith around more, and I know he's intrigued by free swing. I know he's starting to buy in more. I know he's a guy Mac really trusts, and so I think both these guys are going to be big contributors into this 12U Floyd season.
Yeah, 100%. I love that call. And I like both these guys a lot. So we'll see what happens going forward. Let's go ahead and talk about Noah Hendricks, who I think a lot of people didn't even know who he was at the beginning of the season. I remember on an August show, I don't remember exactly what the segment was. I think it was like name a dark horse candidate for the #1 prospect or a top 5 prospect. Was a segment we did on BBN. And I said on the show, people may not even know this guy yet, but Noah Hendricks is going to be a top 5 prospect. And I don't know if he'll be necessarily top 5, but I definitely think he's kind of made his case, especially on the pitching side, that he is going to be a contributor for a varsity Bears team next year. Very, very impressed by what he did all season long. And then in the #5 spot for Rookie of the Year, we had Trey Vonderhyde, who it was kind of him and Rudy competing for that #5 spot. Trey had a little bit better stats over the full fall season. We've talked about Rudy a lot, and I think, I think consensus of the three of us, I think we agree that Rudy may have a little bit of a higher floor right now. But in terms of ceiling, I personally think that Trey's right up there with Rudy in terms of that ceiling. Bernie, give me your thoughts on Trey Vonderhyde and the ceiling you think he has going forward.
Yeah, both those guys, we all have really high hopes for. And I think that Rudy, caught a little bit of fire toward the end of the fall, right? So we had a lot of hype going into the winter about him. But Trey was just, decently good all fall. I know we ranked him, I think, as our #3 prospect coming into it. I don't know if he was quite, living up to that hype, but, he was good all fall, man. And I think that he's one of those guys that, like KJ just said, it's rare for people to come join the Bears and then jump all in. And Trey has jumped all in. So I think that, with everything we put in front of him this winter, from winter league to workouts to practices to free swing, even things like 500 reps, right? If he continues to stay all in, this guy will be, a legit top, MVP type hitter come next spring.
Yeah, I agree. I like Trayvon Hyde a lot. I do think Rudy kind of stole some hype from him down the stretch. But I'm excited. We're gonna do our top 50 prospects once again here in the month of November, and I'm really excited to see where Trey falls on that list because I think I'm gonna be pulling the horn for Trey all season long going into or all winter long going into next season. let's go ahead and take a look at some of our first team All-Americans. Didn't really get to talk about these guys much at all on the show. A lot of names on this list. Several guys that we've talked about a lot, but a couple guys that I feel like we haven't talked about too much. And I'm going to go ahead and start with one of those guys that I feel like kind of slid under the radar all season long. And that was sorry here, I lost my notes. That was Matthew Hume, who I thought had a really nice season. I thought there was definitely arguments to be made over the course of the year that he was the best hitter on 11U. KJ, give me your thoughts on Matthew Hume. You know, if you would have told me that Matthew Hume would be a first team All-American for a varsity squad before the season, I think you may have said, "Who is that?" You know, I don't even know who that is. So for him to put together the season he did, I thought was really impressive. KJ, give me your thoughts on Matthew Hume being a first team All-American.
Yeah, here's a guy we kind of missed when we talked about this team. It was a lot of talk this going into the fall about this team, and I think a lot of the talk was about Dominic Ahern, Owen Dobrinsky, and I think earlier I will say I think we have to admit we kind of left out Closter in that conversation of who was going to be the best players on this team, and we definitely for sure left out Matthew Hume, and I don't think any of us saw this coming. How good he was, and I think every team kind of has that guy who, steps in and is just way better than we expected. And on that team, it was definitely Matthew Hume, and this guy was a legit, player. He wasn't getting just dinky hits. This guy was consistent. He didn't just have a couple hot weekends. This guy was good all fall long, and I know Mac is a big fan of him, and he trusts Matthew going into the next spring.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what this guy does. I'm honestly not at 11U practice, so I'm not sure what his work ethic is like. But I'm excited to see if he can replicate this season going into next year. Very, very encouraging stuff from this guy. Another guy who I thought had a very nice season over the course of the year was Jack Roberts. So I think really kind of turned things around from the slow summer start he had. Bernie, Jack Roberts, I think, had a lot of hype, especially from me. I remember I called him a dark horse MVP candidate for the summer season. I think I was definitely wrong in the summer. He kind of came off a little bit slow, but really turned it around this fall and had a really nice fall season. Give me your thoughts on Jack Roberts turning things around and having a first team All American fall season.
Yeah, obviously it's great to see for Jack. I know last spring, so like 2022 spring, that you made some big bold predictions about him. He came out, and he delivered, and he was hyped up the rest of the year. He came into this season, his sophomore season with the Bears, didn't exactly have the best start. But like you said, down the stretch was great for that Dalton team. Arguably a top 3 or 4 hitter on that squad, and I think that is more of the normal from Jack Roberts. I think that's what we'll see going into the next year from him.
Yeah, I agree. I think this guy is a superstar. I do think his high school team kind of messed with him a little bit, and that kind of caused a slow start. But hopefully he kind of learned from that and isn't going to let that affect him going into next year. So we'll see. Another guy who I think, if you would have said was a first team All American at the start of the fall, I think we would be surprised, was Avery McNicholas, who at times I thought was one of the best hitters on this team. Down the stretch, he was torrid over the last couple of weeks, just crushing everything. And then on the mound, he really started to be a contributor for this team. Still, I think he's kind of more in the early stages of his pitching career, still more of a strike thrower than he is a dominant arm. But I think you see the potential for him to really step up into that role. I'm excited to see what this guy does. KJ, give me your thoughts on Avery McNicholas delivering a first-team All-American season.
Yeah, obviously I'm a big fan of Avery McNicholas, and I think going into the spring, I was the highest on him. I mean, this is a guy who had 0 top team experience, and I rolled him starting at second base week 1 of the season. And basically, a lot of that came from, his work ethic. This is a guy who lives at the Bud Dome. And something I've seen from Avery is that, he lived at the Bud Dome all off season, but, he wasn't a great player. And I remember him watching every BWL week. He wasn't on the team. He didn't get picked up by a team. He was just watching every single week. And this guy, soaked it all in, and he had a lot of motivation to work hard. Well, even when he started having success, the work ethic didn't change. He was still working hard. He's still in multiple free swings. He's still up there 4 or 5 times a week. So this is a guy I'm a huge fan of, and I think he's only going to get better from here.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that a lot of people are starting to kind of turn to as a big time player. So very excited to see what he's going to do going into next year. Moving into our second team All-Americans, a lot of names here. Obviously, this is kind of more of our middle of the, not middle of the road, but like mid-level stars on the top teams, and also some players on our second level teams who had great seasons. And I want to go ahead and start with another 11U guy, a guy who I'm going to be honest, I didn't know much about until the last couple weeks where I started looking into his stats and I was like, oh, who is this guy? And I'm not sure which of you two would kind of be better to talk about him. But let's go ahead and start with Bernie. I know you've been kind of at 11U practices recently. I think you've gotten to see this guy a little bit. Give me your thoughts on Landon Hines, a guy who really for me was a sleeper season this year. Second team All-American. I thought he was very, very impressive. What are your thoughts on Landon Hines, Bernie, and the season he had, and what do you think his potential kind of is?
Yeah, just from looking at the stats, he had a great year. I'm not going to sit up here and act like I've watched Landon Hines, take 100 at bats on that, but just from being at 11U practices, a little bit with their field, right? He works very hard at practice. Being around Mac a lot of those practices, Mac has nothing but good things to say about him, right? He's always talking up Landon Hines when it comes to hitting, fielding, anything. This was a guy that I think sat toward the bottom of the lineup all year, but he started every game, never got subbed out. Always, had to like you look up and he go 2 for 3, and then that's what he just did every game. Mac trusts him, and I think that going into next year, he's no longer a sleeper, right? I think that he'll come out and he'll produce the same type of numbers.
Yeah, I'm excited for him. I'm not sure. Again, I haven't seen this guy play too much, but I'm not sure what his ceiling kind of is. I think he put together a really solid under the radar type season this year, and I'm excited to see what he does going forward. Let's go ahead and move into some of our 12U guys who were second team All Americans. And Bernie, I'm going to throw this one right back to you with Brody Wilburn, who I think has maybe a little bit of the inconsistency factor that we talk about with some guys, but when he's on, man, he is one of the best players on this team. I think if he can kind of get a little bit more consistent with his hitting production, I think you could see this guy being a first team All-American, maybe even MVP caliber type player. What do you think of Brody Wilburn's fall season, Bernie?
Yeah, Brody's one of those guys that they are a full baseball family, right? We've seen Lucas do it. This kid's going to work hard all offseason, right? So I expect great things next season from him. But I think just even this fall, even the summer season, Brody's problem's not striking out. He's going to put the ball in play every single at bat, right? Even on his bad weekends, he's going to put the ball in play every single at bat, right? Where his inconsistency comes, I think, is the fear of him striking out. I think sometimes he gets a little timid if he's going through a bad stretch where he'll just, he's like, I just don't want to strike out. Let me just hit this ball to the second baseman, a little weak ground ball. But when his confidence is all the way there, man, when he's feeling good, this guy is, right among the top, 2 or 3 hitters on my team. And I think that, after this offseason, we'll see a lot more consistency of, being that top hitter next season.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about it is a lot of the stuff you're saying right now, Bernie, is stuff that I was saying about Lucas when I took over that team when they were 11U. I saw Lucas Wilburn being that guy who had so much potential to be a power hitter, but constantly went up there and just tried to put the ball in play and not try to do damage. I think Brody's kind of going through that same thing, and I think honestly having Lucas as his older brother be able to kind of help him work through it mentally, I think is going to help him progress a little bit quicker than Lucas did. And obviously, you see the kind of player Lucas Wilburn is. We just said he could have arguably been the MVP for the Bears if we did a full season award. So I think very, very excited to see what Brody does going forward. Moving on to another guy who, I think arguably could have been first team All-American based on the numbers he put up. But again, I thought was really, really surprised by what this kid did on the offensive side. And that was Josh Collier, who we've always kind of talked about as a sleeper pitcher. He's always been kind of that guy who we've said, we've never kind of called him a PO. He's never been that level, but he's on the roster for his arm. He's on the roster to make an impact on the mound. And I thought this season he did both. This fall season, he was an impactful pitcher. He ate a lot of innings for this team, was a very solid arm all season. Didn't quite have that electric outing that he's capable of, but never really had that awful outing that he goes up there and can't throw any strikes. But I thought at the plate was really, really impressed. KJ, give me your thoughts on Josh Collier and his second team All-American fall season.
Yeah, obviously Josh was a big time bat coming in the fall, and here's a guy who we kind of struggle in the mid part of the order for a long time on that team, and we were looking for guys to step up, and I think it was a big thing of what we just kind of talked about with Brody and Lucas, man. He can be afraid to strike out. I think, you know, he's thought so long that he's a guy who goes up there and walks and he doesn't have to be that way. And I thought Josh came to the fall and he swung at way more pitches. The walks went down, but the extra bases went way up. The RBIs went way up. He's always been a clutch type of hitter, but this guy was doing it all at all points of the game, and he was my fifth best hitter in the fall. He batted in the 5 spot, and he drove in a lot of runs for this team in the fall. And I think, we sometimes see, man, that Josh, it's never been a problem for Josh to put in work. He's always been a guy who will put in work, and I think he's finally seen that work really paying off on the offensive side, and I think that's going to really motivate him for the spring.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what kind of happens with Josh Tyre going forward. But another guy that I want to go ahead and talk about here, this is kind of one of those guys that we talk about with second team All-Americans. You get the kind of middle level of the top teams, but you also get the elite level of the bottom teams. And a guy who had an amazing offensive season for his standards. This guy we've talked about a lot for his glove. We've talked about a lot for his arm, but it felt like this fall he turned into the hitter that he's kind of been missing in his game, and that was Josiah Leaker. And Bernie, I know this is a guy that you like a lot. I obviously have talked about this guy a lot, but a lot of our talks has been about his glove and about his arm. This season, he had the bat. I mean, he was easily, he was easily a top 2 hitter on that Bell squad. Him and Don Palucci, who were the 2 second team All-Americans, were easily the best 2 hitters. But I thought this season he put together a really nice offensive fall. Bernie, give me your thoughts on Josiah Leaker, specifically with what he was able to do with the bat this fall.
Yeah, we've said it on past shows before that this guy, he's a good pitcher. I think he already has a top team type glove. The one downside to his game was his bat, and that seemed to just kind of go away this fall. He was one of the top hitters in that squad. And I think if you're looking toward next year, I think Josiah knows right now that he's in competition for a starting spot on the top team, right? Like if he works hard enough, he could be that guy going into next year. And I think just with that extra motivation, because Josiah already works hard. I think with that little bit of extra motivation, I think Josiah could win a battle and end up being a starter on the top team come spring.
Yeah, 100%. I think, I've constantly been asking this guy to improve at the plate. That's kind of been, if I, as a coach, I tend to carry the best offensive players. I don't really put a guy on my bench that can't hit. Typically I fill my bench with bats, that'll go up there and do damage. And I've told Josiah before that if it were if I were a different coach and I was defensive minded, he'd already be on the top team. So I think for him to put up these offensive numbers plus what he's able to do with the glove, I think this guy's got a real chance to be a top team player going into next year. Kind of moving down this list, a lot of guys that we've talked about a little bit over the course of the season. I want to talk about a guy who has always had the ceiling, and I don't know if he necessarily put it all together this fall, but he definitely did enough to be a second team All-American, and I think showed flashes of being maybe even better than that going forward. And that was Ben Lillard, who had a really nice season. This guy's been a big prospect for a long time in terms of we always thought he could be that guy who really took the Dalton squad to the next level and took his game to the next level. And I think this fall we saw flashes. He hit home runs on big fields. He was one of the best, examples of power on that Dalton squad. And if he can get a little bit more consistent, I think that we can see this guy being a beast. KJ, give me your thoughts on Ben Lillard and the fall he put together this fall.
Yeah, the power has always been a constant, I think, for Ben. At least the hard swinging has always been a constant. And I think, Ben's always been a guy who swings hard, but, he swings out of his shoes almost and strikes out a lot. And I think Ben's really bought into the approach, man, that I'm going to either strike out or I'm going to hit a bomb. I'm going to go up there, try to hit a home run or strike out trying. And I think he did that. And he saw a lot of success with that approach. And I think Ben is kind of a rare specimen when it comes to players. I mean, this guy can absolutely fly around the bases, but he can also have light tower power. And, I think that Dalton squad's really lucky to have a guy like him. And on a team that already is filled with a bunch of superstars, I think Ben's a perfect player for that squad.
Yeah, and he's also a very good defender as well. So when we make comparisons on this show, we typically compare him to other Bears players, but I actually want to make an MLB comparison that Ben Lillard is kind of like a Tyler O'Neill type, a guy who light tower power, super, super athletic, super strong, super fast, good defender. I think that's kind of the ceiling case, maybe not to that level. Although, Ben, if he puts it all together, he could play professional baseball, certainly. But I think that is the kind of profile that you see from Ben Lillard. And I think what kind of turned Tyler O'Neill into a, on the edge of star player was just getting a little bit more consistent, laying off speed, when you do get a fastball, crushing it. And I think those are kind of the steps Ben could take to really be an MVP caliber player. Lastly, for our fall awards, I want to talk about a couple players on the all rookie team. A lot of guys are names that we've talked about, but I do want to touch on a couple guys who maybe we haven't said their names at all in terms of BBN or BBN After Dark. And I want to start with a 12U player. This guy was on the second team all season, but as a guy who, among kind of the circle of coaches, Fred Smith, me, Bernie, and even KJ, this guy's name has started to come up a lot more, and that's Gabe Brown. And a guy who I'm not sure that a lot of people even know who he is right now. And I'm not sure he's going to necessarily make the Burnstall roster coming out of the winter into spring. But I think when you talk about long term, I could definitely see this guy being a contributor. Bernie, give me your thoughts on Gabe Brown and kind of the projection you see for his career.
Yeah, Gabe was one of those guys that, when he came here, I was unsure of, what he was going to be. But, every time I see this kid more and more, I like him more and more. This kid, he works hard in free swing. I know KJ's raved about him, which is make me like him more because I respect what KJ thinks about him. And then just even like in the cages, right? I watch him for 2 or 3 hours, stay after free swing or after workouts or whatever it may be, and he'll hit in the cage for a couple hours by himself. With that level of determination, like with his hard work, I don't know if his time will be next spring exactly, but his time will come at some point over his Bear career.
Yeah, I think we've really gotten excited about the ceiling for Gabe Brown. So very, very impressed by what he's done so far. Another guy who maybe we've started to talk about a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but a guy who I think going into the winter and going into this top 50 prospects list that we're going to put out, this guy's stock has really risen over the past couple of weeks, and that's Nolan Chilton. KJ, I know this is a guy that you like a lot. Obviously, I think his stock has really risen very recently, so maybe there's a little bit of recency bias there, but I think the ceiling is undoubtable for this kid. Give me your thoughts on Nolan Chilton, KJ.
Yeah, Nolan, obviously, I've only seen this guy play 1 or 2 times in person, but there's just raving reports about this guy. I mean, and I know, that whole age respects him. The top team players. Nolan didn't get a lot of time on the top team this year, but the top team players respect Nolan Chilton. They respect his game and they think he could be a big time contributor for them come spring. But what I heard was Nolan is a big, he's a good pitcher. And a good defender, and you still got to find a bat. Well, I saw Nolan take a couple really, really good at bats, hit a couple balls really hard. I know he plays a really good outfield, and I know this guy can pitch. And I think, he has a really good size. He's very tall. I think he fills that body out a little bit this spring. Works really hard. Has a big BWL season, and he's a big time contributor on the top team come spring.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see what this guy is going to do going forward, and a guy I think that we're all kind of getting really excited about going into the winter. Let's go ahead and shift gears here to the BWL drafts. A lot of people tuned in for the draft, and a lot of people are excited for this winter league. I think last year's BWL was just so much fun, and I think this year has potential to be even more exciting. Obviously, we have 4 leagues this year instead of 3. It feels like the leagues are a lot deeper, especially at the younger ages. In terms of the 2 14-15 leagues, I think this 12-13U league maybe not as deep as last year's 12-13U league, but in terms of maybe what we expected, I think there's a lot of names that have gotten really interesting lately for this league as well. But let's go ahead and go through the drafts one at a time, starting with the 12-13U league. And Bernie, you're going to get us kicked off with every single draft, starting with your steal of the draft. I want to kind of get your thoughts here, Bernie. Obviously, you're kind of the neutral party. I'm the coach of the throwbacks. KJ is the coach of the pinstripes. I think we're both kind of impartial to we got the teams we wanted. So I want to get a neutral opinion, Bernie. Who do you think either team had the biggest steal of the draft in the 12-13U league?
biggest steal between both teams? Only one name between the two teams?
Well, I'm gonna have you give me both names. Let's start with the number one biggest steal of the draft. Whichever name you think was an even bigger steal than the other.
Yeah. This is not my official answer, but if this guy was here, getting Paxton to play in the 12th round is obviously a massive steal. I know he plays hockey, right? He's going to miss a decent amount, but when he's there, one of the top players. For my pick for this draft, I went from the team throwback 7th round pick, and I picked Owen Lewis, just because I watched this guy all year. I think that he was, from a full season perspective, the team's second best hitter. Again, from full season perspective, I think that for this team, he could be their starting second baseman, right? I think he's going to play short when ZZ pitches. And Owen himself is a very good pitcher, right? Fourth in our Cy Young voting. I think to get a player that, is nearly elite at every side of the ball in the 7th round is a very good steal.
Yeah, and I think this is a guy who, from my perspective, drafting this guy, I think he was a little bit slept on. I think that people are undervaluing how good he's going to be on the mound, and I think they're undervaluing how good he's going to be at the plate. I think this guy, what makes a guy successful in the BWL on the mound? I think it's throwing strikes and throwing off speed. And I think he does both those things really, really well. I think he's going to keep these top hitters off balance with curveballs, and maybe some of these lower level guys, I think he's going to overwhelm them by just pounding the strike zone. I'm really excited for this kid on both sides of the ball, and I think I agree with you, Bernie. I got a great steal there. How about for the Pinstripes draft, Bernie? Who did you think was the biggest steal for the Pinstripes besides Paxton LaPlante?
Yeah. My second option for this would have been Giovanni. I think that guy's a very good hitter. I think he could be, top, 6 hitter on that squad. But for my pick, I went again to 12. Maybe I'm a little partial, but I went with Brody Wilburn with their 9th round pick. I think this guy was slept on a little bit. I think he was slept on throughout the season. I think he consistently batted 400 the entire year. This kid's still a 4 or 5 top 12U hitter. I know it's 12U versus 13U, but I think he's still going to be at the worst case scenario, top 6, 7 hitter on this team. I think getting a guy like that in the 9th round, who's also a good catcher, who can also pitch, is very good value.
Yeah, and KJ, when it came to your kind of process, what did you think about seeing Brody Wilburn available in the 9th round, and what are you kind of expecting for him going into this BWL season?
Yeah, I think in the 9th round, I'm kind of looking at a guy who can have a big impact on the game with one swing. And at that point in the draft, there's not many guys. I wasn't necessarily looking for a backup player. I wasn't necessarily looking for someone, pinch run. I was looking for someone who I can go up there and pinch hit, and he can win the game with one swing of the bat. And I think Brody can do that. And he can also, he plays a really good catcher, which was a need on my team to get a defensive catcher. So I think Brody was a really good fit, and I know he has a really good spirit. I got to coach Lucas Wilburn last year. I get to coach him again this year, and I wasn't sure how well me and Lucas were gonna connect, how much chemistry we were gonna have with, how much little experience we've had together. But I thought me and Lucas worked really well together last year. I think we're gonna work really well together this year, and I think me and Brody are gonna do the same.
Yeah, I thought it was a great pick when you made it. I wasn't going to let this guy fall to you again. So if you didn't pick him here, I definitely would have grabbed him. I thought it was a great pick. And I felt like I was drafting some needs before Brody Wilburn got picked and kind of missed out on him. And he's a guy looking back that I definitely think I could have made a bigger priority for. I thought it was a great pick when you made it. KJ, we'll start with you here. Of the bottom 4 round picks, so your 10th through 13th round picks, you got Nick Byrne, Jacob Lowry, Paxton LaPlante, and Carson Werner. Again, Paxton's kind of a special scenario, so maybe we'll leave him out. So Nick Byrne, Jacob Lowry, Carson Werner. Which of those 3 guys, KJ, are you looking to make the biggest impact? Or maybe who do you think has the highest ceiling of those 3 guys?
Man, I'm going to tell you, we haven't really seen it come to fruition yet, but Jacob Lowry is going to be a very, very good player come spring. I think this is a guy who's, buying into everything. He's at every program. He just got him pitching. He's been in free swing for a long time since he's joined. And he's got the want. He's got the grit that you want. And this guy's motivated, and he's got a good swing. I think, again, he's been told his whole life, don't strike out, don't strike out, don't strike out. So he's got some of that, just put the ball in play type swing, but I think he's starting to get out of that. This is a guy who plays a solid second base. And I think second base is one of the positions on my team come spring that's wide open to compete for. I think he plays a solid second base. I think his bat's going to come around, and this guy can absolutely fly around the bases. And it won't hurt that he's in pitching now and will end up being able to pump strikes come spring. And I think in the BWL, he can make an impact on the mound in a league that I think is the most thin at pitching. He could definitely make an impact on the mound for me. He can play good infield, and I think he's going to come out and get some big hits in the BWL. And by the end of the year, maybe he's in the starting lineup.
Yeah, I love that. I think, you kind of went the direction of your late round picks. You're looking for high ceiling, unknown type players. And I think all three of those picks, Nick, Jacob, and Carson were all good ones. For me, my bottom four picks were Owen Haynes, Georgie Buhazen, Hunter Finley, and Rowan Damschroeder. And I got to say, I'm most excited about Owen Haynes. I thought people are really sleeping on the impact he's going to have. I know I said before that I didn't take the age gap seriously enough last year, and that was kind of priority for me this year. But I can't help but thinking that Owen Haynes, who's just a star at his own age, I think he's good enough to hang at this level, especially like you said, KJ, pitching's a little thin. I think, obviously, listen, I'm not going to send Owen up to the plate against Cam Bernstein, but when you get into those fourth, fifth, sixth pitchers on the roster, I think Owen Haynes is going to be able to feast on those guys, and I think he's going to be a big production. I thought he was the biggest steal of the draft myself. I thought he's going to be a big impact player, and if you look at what he got picked 20th, I think he's going to be a better than top 20 player. So I'm very excited to see what he's going to do. Moving into our A League at 14-15U, a ton of talent here. This is by far the most talented winter league we've ever had in the Bears. Very excited to see these two teams go at it. But Bernie, who did you think was the number one steal of the draft for this league?
Yeah, so for the biggest steal of the draft, I went to the throwbacks with their 12th round pick and picked Trevor Anderson. I also had Adam Shockley bolded on my list as well, just because he's been underrated all season. But I did go with Trevor for this, just because I think he was involved in football all fall. So when he missed a lot, and when he was there, he played the bell because he wasn't making every game, so he wasn't going to play for Floyd. But I mean, people forget this kid is very legit, right? Talk about an upside pick with a late round pick. This guy could be one of the top hitters, right? Throws hard on the mound, could be a good pitcher for this team if they need it. Also a good little defender at third base, right? But I think that the main value here comes from the bat that Trevor could give you.
Yeah, I loved getting this guy where I got him. I felt like with my draft strategy, the plan was to draft hitters early, pitchers in the mid rounds, and then finish it off with some big upside bats at the end. And I thought getting Trevor where I got him, I actually wanted to take him earlier, but I felt myself having a draft of need and get some pitchers. And I thought him falling to me where he did, I loved getting Trevor where I got him. And I'm very excited to see what he's going to do in the BWL season. How about for the Pinstripes, Bernie? Who did you think was their best value or biggest steal pick in their draft?
Yeah, for their draft, I went back up to the 7th round again, and I went with Jack Kester. This is a guy that passed through my mind at least a little bit on draft day. But I think that this guy, looking at their roster, I know they have some very good hitters on this team, like Ben Willeret, Lucas Wilburn. But there is a world in which Jack Kester could be the best hitter on this team. He showed flashes of it all winter, or all fall in his rookie season with the Bears. Right now in the first winter, I think definitely by turn of the year, down the stretch toward the playoffs in this league, this guy could be the best hitter. I know he's not a good defender. He's a lefty, so he's not going to play infield for him, right? He's not going to pitch probably, but just with the bat, he could be the best hitter on this squad.
Yeah, I love that call. And obviously, Jack has gotten into free swing as well. And who knows what kind of level he could commit. KJ, what did you think about getting Jack Kester where you got him?
Yeah, here's a guy I had, going much higher, and I was really excited that he fell to me where I got him. And like Bernie said, I think there is potential he could be, one of the best hitters on the team. I mean, I saw this guy hit multiple big bombs, and I think there is a little bit of a thing about lefties in the BWL might have trouble with the dimensions, but I think the way Jack Kester hits the ball, man, hard on the line, I think he's going to adjust just fine, and he's going to have a big time season.
Yeah, I think you kind of see concerns with that. Last year, you kind of saw that with Vince Dalton, the guy who's a pull hitting power lefty. I think Jack is a little bit more line drive and definitely a little bit lower strikeout rate than Vince. So I think he is a little bit more suitable for that BWL field. And KJ, like I said, my draft strategy was hitters early, pitchers in the middle. So that kind of got away from me getting Jack Kester because in that part of the draft, I was trying to get pitchers. I think you got a great player, KJ. Obviously, I coached this kid all fall. He's a beast, and I think he's going to make me pay several times this season for not drafting him. I think he's going to hurt my team in several instances. So I think you got a great one there, KJ. Moving into our B League draft, Bernie, this was to me the most interesting draft with how it's going to go. I think neither me or KJ had a good idea of where guys should be drafted. So I think it made for some really interesting late round picks. I think there were a couple guys that I drafted early. Kennedy was like, I wasn't going to draft that guy for several rounds. There were a couple guys he drafted early that I wasn't going to draft for a couple rounds. So I think the value of players was really interesting in this draft. So Bernie, as a neutral party, who did you think was the biggest steal of this draft?
Yeah, so when you're looking at the B League, I think you're looking at guys, who could contribute to the A team, right? Those high ceiling type guys that you want to see get a lot of at bats. So I decided to go with a guy that all three of us love. We've seen the flashes of him hitting multiple home runs in a single weekend. I went to Pinstripes 8th round pick. I went with Braden Miller. I think at his best he could be, one of the best players in the league. And I think that he could make a run on the A team at some point.
Yeah, definitely in terms of ceiling. I don't know that anybody in the B League has a higher ceiling than Braden Miller. Obviously, pure power, pure exit velocity. Still an inexperienced player, but he's shown that he's going to get better quickly. KJ, what did you think about getting Braden Miller in the 8th round of this draft?
Yeah, probably the easiest selection that I made was taking a guy like Braden Miller. Like you said, this guy has just a huge ceiling of what he can do. And I think that, I think me and him are going to work well together. And I think we talk a lot about, on the Pinstripes about chemistry. And I think, I really do think if there's someone who can get Braden Miller to hit that ceiling more consistently, I'm the guy to do that. And I think we're going to work really well together. And I think Braden's going to absolutely dominate in the BWL.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, KJ, as the coach of the throwbacks, I was really frustrated to see you get Braden Miller there. He was just coming up on my board. I was going to take him probably with my next pick at that point. But as the coach of 14U Bears, I'm happy for you to get him. I think that you are a great coach for Braden. I'm thinking that you're going to unlock him and take him to that next level. So on that front, I am excited to see you coach him. I think your coaching style works really well with Braden. So I am excited for that part of the game. But just like Jack, man, he's going to make me pay, I think, a couple times this season and come up at some big spots. How about for the throwbacks, Bernie? Who did you think was the biggest steal for the throwbacks draft in the 14-15 B League?
Yeah, so I went all the way down to I'm not sure it was last overall. I'm not sure who picked first in the draft, but their last round pick, I went with Colin Sandler, a guy that I think we all like. Again, I've seen him get a lot better in pitching, right? I think he could give you innings if you need it. Even with the bat, right? He hits the ball very hard in free swing. I think just if you're trying to get a guy in the 13th round that can contribute to your team, Colin's that guy. I think will make a bigger impact than most people think.
Yeah, and for me, the pitching side is what's really exciting. I think he's got the potential to be a good hitter, but I think he's got the potential to be an unbelievable pitcher. Very good arm, in terms of the velocity. He's got a really nasty off-speed pitch, a little bit questionable control right now, but he's going to be in precision pitching all winter, and I think he's just going to keep getting better. I think there's a chance he is the best pitcher in the B League at the end of the season, and for me to get him in the 13th round, I potentially got the best pitcher in the draft in the 13th round. I thought was unbelievable value. I was actually looking to draft this kid several points throughout the draft, and for him to fall to me where he did, I thought was really, really exciting for me. So I thought that was a great pick as well. And then over the rest of the draft, KJ, when it comes to your kind of low round picks, specifically, I actually want to go for your last 3 rounds: David Morrison, Seth Mullen, and Will Dykeman. KJ, of those 3 picks, which of them are you most excited about going into the BWL season?
Yeah, I think a guy who's gone very under the radar, and a guy who's really worked hard lately, and it's kind of gone unnoticed, and that's Dave Morrison. I've seen this guy hitting we had a couple weeks off here for the Bears, no practices, and Dave's been up there every week. He was texting me about when's the earliest he can come in on Fridays when I'm there working free swing, when he can come in and hit the cages. He's been up there hitting in the cages, getting work in. So Dave's always a guy who I've admired his hard work. Back when we had Monday Night Circuit, he was a guy who I thought I got a lot out of, and he always really pushed himself for me. So I think, going into the BWL is going to be that same kind of thing. I'd be lying if I said I thought Dave was going to contribute to the A team this year, but I think he can really make a name for himself in the B League, and going into spring, being one of the top B League hitters, I think is going to be definitely a big factor on Rob's mind when he's creating teams.
Yeah, he's an exciting pick for sure. So very, very excited to see what David Morrison does at the kind of bottom half of that draft. Okay, Bernie, finally we have our 16-18U league. Who did you think was the biggest steal of that draft?
Yeah. So for this draft, I went to Team Throwbacks with their 9th-round pick, a guy I've spoken highly about multiple times on many shows, with Cole Miller from 16U Burn. I think this guy maybe just got overlooked because he's a 16 player, right? Not on Dalton right now, but I think he will be. I think this guy, I think he could be a starting shortstop for this team day one. I think that, with the mound, he throws hard, has some control issues, but if he's on, right, can be one of the better pitchers in the BWL for that league. And with the bat, right, this guy's a very good hitter. I think he's Dalton ready right now. I just think that he's going to be a very good player for a team, for Throwbacks team, and he got drafted all the way down in the 9th round.
Yeah, and I would say this is the age that 16U roster is kind of the one that is the most unknown for me, at least. I don't run their practices. Obviously I don't have anything to do with their games. So 16U is kind of the most unknown. I've seen Cole Miller on the Bud Dome. I've seen, obviously, when I'm doing research for BBN, I watch this guy take at bats on video, but I'm really excited to get a chance to coach this guy because I think the tools are really impressive, and I think this guy has the potential to be a huge contributor for this draft. How about the pinstripes, Bernie? Who did you think was the biggest steal of the pinstripes draft?
Yeah, this one to me was the hardest one to pick out for me, at least. But I'm going to go with the Pinstripes 10th round pick and just take Andrew Willeret. I think that this guy, I know he's a 15U player playing up, but he's a superstar at the 15U level. His ability to hit, but also get on base, I think is going to be very important for that Pinstripe team. And I think that, Willeret could be, a top 5-6 hitter on the squad, and you get him all the way down in the 10th round. I know he can't pitch for them. He's not probably going to play much defense in the infield for him, but I just think with his bat, you're going to get a lot of production out of him, even at 18U.
Yeah, and KJ, getting this guy where you got him, what did you think of that pick?
Man, I think there's a lot of overreaction when it comes to Andrew Willeret's season. He still had a very good season, and I think people have taken it as, he's digressed. And, I really don't think he has. And I think, I got him. I think I picked him 4th or 5th in the other league, and I think that was too late for him. So it was an easy selection here at 18U. This guy was really good in 18U last year. He was really good. So I'm really confident in calling his number at that age, and I think he's going to have some big moments for this year for that team.
Yeah, I am as well. And to go ahead and end the show here, I want to go ahead. I didn't prepare you guys with this question, so I'll go ahead and go first. But I do want all three of us to give an answer here. Last year, again, we had, I believe, 72 players drafted in the BWL last year, and nearly 100 players played in the BWL. So a lot of guys got picked up. I want to go ahead and each of us give our best player that was undrafted this year, because I think there are going to be a lot of players picked up once again. And KJ, I don't want you to give away your strategy or anything about who you're looking to pick up, but I do think, in terms of guys who didn't get drafted, the best undrafted player. I'll go ahead and go first because I didn't prepare you guys with these questions, so you can go ahead and think about it. I'm going to go with a guy who I'm not sure a lot of people even know about, but a guy who is on my board, and I had full intentions of drafting him. If the draft was 15 rounds, I definitely would have taken him, and that's Brandon Wheatley, who's a guy who, again, I'm not sure a lot of people know about. Evan Wheatley is his cousin. This is a guy who I think has really turned himself into a slick defender at first base. I think his bat is really raw right now, but I think it's got a lot of potential. And I've been impressed with his work ethic as well. So that's a guy who, if I get an opportunity, maybe a guy gets hurt or sick, or a guy's just not performing well, I'm going to be very aggressive about picking this kid up. I'm really excited about him. Bernie, to go with you, I think I know what your answer is going to be, so I'll go with you next. Bernie, who do you think was the best player who didn't get drafted?
Yeah, I think where I'm probably going with this. I'll stick in my 12U age. A rookie that I've been very high on. Um, Connor Kennedy for me. I think this kid, with some time here, it's gonna become a legit top team player. I think that at some point he will get a chance to prove it in the BWL.
Yeah, I agree, Bernie. He was the #1 guy on my draft board left over after the draft was finished. For me, he's a guy who, again, if the draft was 14 rounds, he would have gotten drafted. And I think if I get an opportunity to pick this kid up, I'm definitely going to. And KJ, for you, who do you think was the best player to not get drafted in the BWL draft?
Yeah, it's hard to say one for me, but I think definitely there's a lot of really good players that didn't get drafted at the 14, 15U age. A lot of guys I can think of, Trenton Hurst, who works really hard, Connor Murphy, who's really, in my eyes, really ramped up the work ethic lately as well. Even a guy like Eric Rahi. I mean, this guy is in free swing multiple times a week. And I think he's a guy who can contribute as well at the 12, 13U age. I think, Josh Kinsey is a guy who's a catcher, and catcher's, really thin position. So I think he definitely will get a shot this year. And, that's just to mention a few, hard to pick out one, but I think just like last year, there's going to be a lot of guys that come up and make an impact who weren't drafted.
Yeah, and KJ, you mentioned a lot of names there, and there's several names you did mention that I thought were really good players. Just to rapid fire here, Reed Rustio, Liam Killian, Johnny Armbruster, Zach Reich, Jacob Vallette, just to name a few. Mason Gebhart, who I know we talked about on the draft show, who's kind of been hurt, his draft stock fallen, and another guy who I really wanted to draft, but there was just a little bit too much talent. Gabe Brown, who we kind of talked about earlier, who I really am excited about. So a lot of players who didn't get drafted that are very, very good, but I think those guys will get picked up over the course of the season. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. But that's going to do this episode of the BBN After Dark. On Friday, we've got a full preview of week 1 of the BWL season. So very excited for that one. Bernie, KJ, thank you for joining me here. This has been the BBN After Dark, and we'll talk to you all next week.